When 68-year-old Margaret Whitmore put on a maid's uniform and walked into her son's penthouse, she had no idea she was about to witness something that would shatter her world. What she saw next would expose the ugliest truth about her billionaire son and change one woman's life forever. Margaret stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the navy blue uniform that felt foreign against her silk-accustomed skin. The matriarch of the Whitmore tech empire, worth over $3 billion, had never imagined she'd be disguising herself as domestic help. But desperate times called for desperate measures, and her 32-year-old son Christopher was running out of time to find a suitable wife. The problem wasn't finding women willing to marry a billionaire. The problem was finding one with genuine character. Christopher had already burned through relationships with 3 socialites, each more vapid and money-hungry than the last. Margaret had watched her son become increasingly arrogant and cruel, treating people as disposable objects rather than human beings. She needed to find someone who would see past his wealth to the man he could become, someone who possessed the integrity to stand up to him when necessary. Her plan was simple yet audacious. She would pose as Maggie, a new employee with Sparkle Clean Services, the company that maintained Christopher's penthouse. From this invisible position, she could observe potential wives in their natural state, away from the performance of courtship. What she didn't expect was to discover that the most remarkable woman in her son's orbit wasn't someone he was dating at all. Keandra Williams arrived at the Whitmore penthouse at exactly 9 p.m., her cleaning cart squeaking slightly as she maneuvered it through the marble lobby. At 28, she carried herself with quiet dignity despite the exhaustion that shadowed her eyes. Her hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail and her uniform was pressed and spotless, even though she'd been working since 6 that morning at her second job. Margaret, now Maggie, watched as Keandra efficiently organized her supplies while greeting her team with genuine warmth. There was something immediately striking about this woman, not her physical beauty, though she was lovely, but the way she commanded respect through kindness rather than authority. "You must be Maggie," Keandra said, extending her hand with a smile that reached her eyes. "Welcome to the team. I'm Keandra, the night supervisor. Don't worry about being nervous. We all were when we first started cleaning for the really wealthy folks. Just follow my lead and you'll do fine." As they worked side by side, Margaret found herself drawn into conversation. Keandra shared her lunch without being asked, patiently corrected Margaret's cleaning technique without condescension, and spoke about her 8-year-old daughter Destiny with such fierce love that Margaret felt a pang of longing. This woman reminded her of her own grandmother, who had raised Margaret with the same blend of strength and compassion. "You have kind eyes," Keandra said as they polished the endless granite surfaces. "Reminds me of my grandmother. She always said you could tell everything about a person by looking at their eyes." Margaret found herself blinking back unexpected tears. When had anyone last commented on her kindness? The peaceful rhythm of their work was shattered when Christopher arrived home 3 hours early from his business dinner. Margaret's heart sank as she watched her son survey the cleaning crew with the same expression he might reserve for unwelcome insects. This was exactly what she had feared witnessing. "Why are you people always so slow?" he barked at Keandra, who was methodically cleaning his floor-to-ceiling windows. "I pay premium prices for premium service, not whatever this amateur hour nonsense is supposed to be." Keandra turned around slowly, maintaining her professional composure despite the obvious insult. "I apologize if we seem slow, Mr. Whitmore. We're being thorough to ensure everything meets your standards. We should be finished within the hour." "I don't pay for excuses," Christopher snapped, deliberately knocking over a bucket of cleaning supplies with his foot. "Clean it again, properly this time." Margaret watched in horror as soapy water spread across the pristine floor. Her son stood there smirking while Keandra quietly knelt to clean up the mess he had intentionally created. The other crew members exchanged uncomfortable glances but said nothing. They needed this job too much to risk confrontation. The situation grew worse when Christopher's friends arrived, a gaggle of trust fund babies who seemed to compete over who could be the most obnoxious. They treated the cleaning crew like furniture, talking around them as if they didn't exist, making crude jokes that had racial undertones Margaret found sickening. "Hey, girl," one of them called to Keandra, snapping his fingers like summoning a dog. "Bring me a scotch. The good stuff, not the cheap bottles." "I'm sorry, but I'm not house staff," Keandra replied politely. "I'm with the cleaning service." "Your drinks are in the bar area over there." The young man's face reddened with embarrassment at being corrected in front of his friends. "Don't get smart with me. You work for us tonight, so you do what we say." Margaret watched her son's reaction with growing dread. Instead of correcting his friend's behavior, Christopher laughed. "She's right, though, Bradley. These people are only here to clean, though I suppose fetching drinks isn't much different from scrubbing toilets." The casual cruelty in his voice made Margaret's stomach turn. She had raised this man, had tried to instill values of respect and dignity in him. Where had she gone wrong? How had her son become someone who derived pleasure from humiliating others? Keandra continued working, but Margaret could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw tightened with each new insult. When one of the friends accidentally spilled red wine on Keandra's clean uniform, Margaret had to grip her cleaning supplies to keep from intervening. She watched Keandra stare down at the stain for a long moment, her hands trembling slightly with suppressed anger, before quietly excusing herself to change into her backup uniform. "Did you see her face?" Bradley laughed. "Priceless. These people need to know their place." Christopher nodded approvingly. "Exactly why I'm thinking of marrying Brittany instead of those other boring socialites. She understands the natural order of things." Margaret's blood ran cold. Brittany Ashford was everything wrong with their social circle, entitled, racist, and utterly lacking in empathy. The thought of that woman becoming her daughter-in-law made Margaret feel physically ill. As if summoned by their conversation, Brittany herself swept into the penthouse an hour later, dripping in designer clothes and fake sweetness. She immediately zeroed in on Keandra, who was quietly dusting bookshelves in the corner. "Christopher, darling," Brittany said loudly, "why is that woman touching your first edition books? These people are naturally dirty. Who knows what diseases they carry? Make her clean the bathroom instead. That's more appropriate work for her kind." The words hung in the air like poison. Margaret saw Keandra's back stiffen, watched her carefully set down the delicate volume she'd been dusting with obvious care and respect. The other crew members had gone silent, pretending to be absorbed in their tasks while the tension crackled around them. Christopher laughed, actually laughed, at his girlfriend's casual racism. "You're probably right. Hey," he called to Keandra, "go clean the master bathroom instead. Make sure you scrub everything twice." Keandra nodded once, gathered her supplies, and walked toward the bathroom without a word. Margaret felt something break inside her chest. This brave, dignified woman was enduring humiliation to support her daughter, and Margaret's own son was the architect of that humiliation. But Margaret was about to discover just how extraordinary Keandra Williams truly was. The evening took a dramatic turn when Christopher's elderly business partner, Harold Henderson, joined them for brandy and cigars. Henderson was 83 years old, a self-made man who had built his fortune through hard work and integrity, qualities that seemed increasingly rare in Christopher's circle. He was regaling them with stories from his early days in business when suddenly, mid-sentence, he clutched his chest and collapsed. The reaction was immediate chaos. Brittany screamed and backed away as if heart attacks were contagious. Christopher and his friends stood frozen, their faces pale with panic and self-preservation. Someone fumbled for their phone to call 911, but in the confusion, no one seemed capable of taking charge. "The ambulance will be here in 15 minutes, someone shouted. But Henderson's lips were turning blue and his breathing was shallow and irregular. 15 minutes might as well have been 15 hours. That's when Keandra appeared. She had heard the commotion from the bathroom and came running, still wearing rubber gloves and carrying a toilet brush. But the moment she saw Henderson on the floor, every trace of the subservient cleaning woman disappeared. In its place stood someone with authority, competence, and unshakable calm. "Everyone step back," she commanded, dropping to her knees beside Henderson. Her hands moved with practiced precision, checking his pulse, lifting his eyelids, positioning his head to clear his airway. You, she pointed to Christopher, call 911 back and tell them we have an 80-plus male experiencing cardiac arrest. You, she indicated one of the friends, clear that couch so we have space to work. Wait, what are you doing? Christopher sputtered. You're just a cleaning lady. We should wait for professionals. Keandra didn't even look up as she began chest compressions. I'm a former nursing student with advanced CPR certification. Right now, I'm the most qualified person in this room to keep him alive. Her voice carried such absolute authority that Christopher actually stepped back. Margaret watched in awe as Keandra worked. Her compressions were perfectly timed, her rescue breaths measured and effective. She kept up a steady stream of encouragement to the unconscious man while simultaneously directing others to help. Come on, Mr. Henderson. Stay with me. Your heart knows what to do. We're just helping it remember. The woman who had been treated like dirt just hours ago had transformed into a guardian angel. She worked tirelessly, her uniform soaked with sweat, her breathing labored from the physical exertion, but her hands never wavered and her voice never lost its steady confidence. When the paramedics finally arrived, they found Henderson's heart beating steadily, his color returning to normal. The lead paramedic, a grizzled veteran, looked from Henderson to Keandra with obvious respect. Outstanding work. You probably saved his life. As they loaded Henderson onto a stretcher, he grasped Keandra's hand weakly. Thank you, he whispered. You're an angel. Keandra squeezed his hand gently. Just get better, sir. The world needs more good men like you. After the ambulance left, an uncomfortable silence settled over the penthouse. Christopher tried to insert himself into the heroic narrative, telling anyone who would listen how they all had helped save Henderson's life. But everyone in that room knew the truth. While the wealthy elite had panicked and floundered, a woman they had dismissed and mocked had stepped up with grace, skill, and courage. Keandra quietly returned to her cleaning, acting as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Margaret watched her scrub the floor where Henderson had fallen, removing every trace of the medical emergency with the same thoroughness she brought to everything else. This woman had just performed a miracle, and now she was back to being invisible. That night, after Christopher and his friends had finally left, Margaret made her decision. She found Keandra in the kitchen, finishing the last of her cleaning tasks. The building was quiet except for the hum of expensive appliances and the distant sound of traffic far below. Keandra, Margaret said softly, I need to speak with you. Keandra looked up, probably expecting another demand or complaint. Instead, she found Margaret pulling off her rubber gloves and removing the cheap hairnet that had been part of her disguise. My name isn't Maggie, Margaret began, watching Keandra's eyes widen as recognition dawned. I'm Margaret Whitmore. Christopher is my son. Keandra sank into one of the kitchen chairs, her mouth falling open. But why were you? I don't understand. Margaret sat across from her, no longer the submissive cleaning woman, but every inch the powerful businesswoman she truly was. I was looking for someone worthy of my son. I thought I needed to find him a wife with character, someone who could see past his money to the man he could become. She paused, her voice heavy with sadness. What I discovered instead is that no woman deserves what my son has become. Keandra's eyes filled with tears. Mrs. Whitmore, I never meant to deceive anyone. I was just trying to do my job. You didn't deceive anyone, Margaret said firmly. You showed me exactly who you are. You're everything I hoped to find and more. You're dignified under pressure, kind without expecting anything in return, and brave enough to act when others freeze. You saved a man's life tonight while people worth hundreds of millions of dollars stood around uselessly. Margaret leaned forward, her voice intense with conviction. I have a proposition for you. How would you like to run the healthcare initiative for the Whitmore Foundation? The position pays $200,000 annually, includes full medical benefits for you and your daughter, and comes with a complete scholarship to return to nursing school. Keandra stared at her in shock. I can't accept charity, Mrs. Whitmore. I won't be anyone's pet project or guilty conscience. This isn't charity, Margaret replied sharply. This is recognition of merit. You have the skills, the compassion, and the leadership qualities we need. The foundation oversees medical clinics in underserved communities. Who better to run that program than someone who understands both sides, the medical expertise and the struggle of those we serve? The conversation was interrupted by Christopher's return. He burst through the front door, still buzzing with adrenaline from the evening's events, ready to continue the party. He stopped short when he saw his mother and Keandra sitting together in his kitchen like equals. Mother, what are you doing here? And why are you talking to the cleaning woman? Margaret stood slowly, her 68-year-old frame somehow managing to tower over her son through sheer force of personality. I'm talking to Keandra because she's the most impressive person in this building, which is more than I can say for its owner. Christopher's face went through several expressions as he processed the scene. Wait, you were here tonight? Why? And what's with those clothes? I was here because I wanted to observe the women in your life without the performance of wealth, Margaret said coldly. I wanted to find someone worthy of joining our family. I found her, but she's far too good for you. The truth hit Christopher like a physical blow. His mother had been watching him all evening, had witnessed his cruelty, his casual racism, his complete lack of basic human decency. You were spying on me. I was trying to help you, Margaret shot back. But what I saw tonight made me realize that you're beyond help. You're a bully, Christopher, a weak, insecure man who feels powerful only when he's making others feel small. Christopher's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. So you want to hire the cleaning lady? Are you insane? She's nobody, Mother. She scrubs toilets for a living. She saves lives for a living, Margaret snapped. While you and your worthless friends were having panic attacks, this woman stepped up and did what needed to be done. She has more class in her little finger than you have in your entire body. Margaret turned to Keandra, who had been watching this family drama unfold with wide eyes. The offer stands. You don't have to give me an answer tonight, but please consider it. The world needs more people like you in positions where they can make a difference. Keandra looked between mother and son, seeing the pain in Margaret's eyes and the petulant anger in Christopher's. When she spoke, her voice was steady and clear. Mrs. Whitmore, I accept your offer, not because I need rescuing, but because I believe in the work you're describing. If you truly want someone who understands both sides of healthcare, the medical side and the human side, then yes, I'm your person. Margaret smiled, the first genuine smile she'd worn in months. Then welcome to the family business, Dr. Williams. Dr. Williams? Christopher scoffed. She's not even a nurse. She will be, Margaret said firmly. And after that, if she chooses, she'll be Dr. Williams. I have a feeling she'll accomplish more in medicine than you ever will in business. 1 year later, Margaret stood in the window of the Whitmore Medical Center, watching Keandra lead a team of nurses through their morning rounds. The young woman wore scrubs now instead of a cleaning uniform, and her confidence had blossomed fully. She moved through the halls of the community clinic like she'd been born to heal, stopping to comfort frightened children, advocating fiercely for elderly patients, and training new nurses with the same patients she'd once shown a disguised billionaire. Christopher had married Brittany, just as he'd threatened, and the union was already showing signs of strain. Margaret had restructured his trust fund, forcing him to earn his place in the company through actual work rather than birthright. He was currently working in the mailroom, learning what it felt like to be on the receiving end of contempt from those who considered themselves his betters. But the real transformation had happened to Margaret herself. In Keandra, she had found not just an exceptional employee, but the daughter she'd always wanted. They spoke every Sunday, and Margaret had become a cherished grandmother figure to little Destiny, who was thriving in her new private school. The final surprise had come from Harold Henderson, who had not only recovered fully from his heart attack, but had established a scholarship fund specifically for healthcare workers returning to school. Keandra was his first recipient, her medical school tuition fully covered by the man whose life she had saved. You know, Keandra said one day as they shared lunch in Margaret's office, I still can't believe how different my life is now. Margaret smiled, thinking of that night in the penthouse when everything had changed. Sometimes the most extraordinary people are hiding in plain sight, she said. They're dismissed because of their circumstances, not seen for their character. I learned that wealth means nothing without compassion, and that the true measure of a person isn't their bank account, it's their heart. Keandra had proven that dignity, kindness, and skill shine brightest when the world tries to dim your light. She had shown that respect is earned through actions, not inherited through privilege. Most importantly, she had demonstrated that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear cleaning uniforms and carry mops, ready to save lives and change the world one act of courage at a time. Margaret had set out to find the perfect wife for her son. Instead, she had discovered something far more valuable, the perfect reminder that character, not circumstances, determines a person's true worth. And in a world that too often judges by appearances, that lesson was worth more than all the billions in the Whitmore family fortune.